Our next speaker is Stephanie Moritz, and let me just introduce her and she'll jump right in. Stephanie is currently the Chief Marketing and Communications Officer at the American Dental Association, and is responsible for leading the transformation of the ADA's communications, marketing, research, digital experience, among some other things as well, some other functions as well. Prior to her role at the ADA, Stephanie has held leadership positions at a number of iconic American brands such as Disney, Jim Beam, Hershey, and Conagra Food. So without further ado, I will let Stephanie take it away.
Thank you so much, Rob, and to everyone at MadPow for having me. I'm going to, just in a moment here, jump into the slides. I want to see if we're able to get those up. There they are. Fantastic. So, all right, I'm going to tell a story. It's going to sound familiar. Here's the situation. Next slide, please. In March 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic changed everything from inside and out. Does this sound familiar? I think it does. So like everyone, we were immediately faced with pivoting from working side by side in an office, day in and day out, to now all of a sudden working remotely and using technology to keep work moving forward. As leaders, we also had to cope with a complete new set of unknowns, such as the timeline. How long is this going to last? How are people coping as the line between work, home, and life have been completely blurred? And how do we sustain work from home? And then a key question really landed with me was, how do we keep our teams connected as colleagues and as humans? So what we did during this time is we went from business as usual to business as unusual. And there were more considerations. People were contending with the pandemic's personal impact of family, life, isolation, and even depression, while being expected to work at these elevated levels. Especially the American Dental Association in healthcare, we were working around the clock with new demands and a completely new paradigm. It felt like we were living Groundhog Day, and it was absolutely clear that people needed grace and space. Next slide, please. So our charge truly was, how can we create empathetic leadership and utilize empathetic design, both inside as well as out? So we're going to make this a little interactive. I'd love to hear from you in the chat. What one word or two words would you use to describe empathy? An adverb, a verb? How would you describe empathy? I'll give you a moment there to add it in the chat. Don't be shy. Well, if we go to the next slide, empathy. Empathy is really the ability to understand and share the feelings of another individual. And with this, let's think about, what are the new ways? What new ways? How did you show up? Oh, and thank you, Brandon. I appreciate your definition. What are some of the new ways that you showed up with empathy? So next slide. I'd love a one-word chat. How did you show up? Or how did your organization react in regards to showing empathetic leadership during this unparalleled time? And I love Brandon's letting people know that you see them and accept them for who they are. I think that's great. Well, if we go to the next slide. Perfect. Absolutely. Oh, listening, checking in, ongoing understanding, kindness, shared concern. Love that. Feelings, listening. Thank you for sharing that in the chat. So for us at the American Dental Association, it really became clear that we needed two clear paths and tiers of empathy. Number one, an internal empathy path for our people and the company. The second was really that external empathy with customers as well as constituents. We knew we needed both in combination in order to get the marked results in company culture with the quantifiable business impact we desired. So next slide, please. So what tools did we use? We think about the tools. When I look at the tools, I think about during times of the greatest uncertainty, I've witnessed 3 different styles of behavior and I'm in tackling it. Number 1, and see if they sound familiar. Number 1, leaning back, that disengaged, that freeze, or just acting business as usual. Often just focusing on business, not looking at the emotions or the human side. All right, there's leaning back. Number 2, staying put. It's kind of that staying right in the middle. It's that wait and see mode. Let's wait and see, what is someone else doing? Let's see what works, and then I'm going to lean in and give it a try. And then there's the third. The third is leaning in to proactively hit that challenge head on, look for solutions, and determine how to best pivot. I leaned in. So with that, if you click to the second key tenet is curiosity. Curiosity is knowing your people, and this starts long before a crisis takes place. When I joined the American Dental Association, I brought 2 tools that I found to be very helpful in terms of creating inspired teams. The first was DISC, the second is Strength Finders. For those unfamiliar, DISC measures a person's behavioral preference. And Strength Finders gives teams and individuals an opportunity to really identify the natural patterns of thinking, feeling, and behavior. Bottom line, these tools were very helpful in understanding not only the makeup of the team, but also each person's individual behavioral style and strengths, as well as how that member may have been handling the challenges facing them during the pandemic. So the organization utilizes those regularly, and we now utilize those more broadly to unleash the superpower so we can create these high-powered teams. So for example, with DISC, with the D and I, the dominant and the influence, I know that these individuals are very fast to respond. They talk out loud, they think fast, they might even talk fast. So in situations, they're going to weigh in right away. However, there are other individuals that the C and the S, the conscientious and the steady. These individuals are typically more analytical, thoughtful. They like to analyze the information, reflect, and need some time to digest. So in a conversation, they might not be the first one to raise their hand. They need some time to think. By understanding an information, it helps you to be able to set up your conversations and really help the team gel in a time of crisis. Finally, you look at putting people first. All right, this one might sound obvious, but it's not just putting people first, it's putting the whole person first. It's recognizing that people are more than just workers. Instead, they're fellow humans with many roles and full complex lives. And it's really seeing and listening and understanding the whole person. Because when you think about it, we as individuals went from wearing one hat at a time to wearing many simultaneously. Personally, I went from being an executive in an office by day to working at home and being an executive, a mom of 2 special needs kids, their child caregiver, their teacher, their aide, their IT help, the chef, a wife, a friend, and family member all at the same time. So part of empathy is really understanding and looking at the person for all they are and who they are. Next slide, please. So with this, one of the things that we immediately I put in place was a daily stand-up. So a daily stand-up meeting with 15 minutes, very short, utilizing kind of the essence of Agile to get the team together. What we did is we created a space to be real, a space to exhale, and utilized it as an intentional mix of agile project management, but also personal empathy. And during this, we had real talk and we also had fun. We celebrated, we had humor, empathy, and I'll tell you, with all the social issues facing us, we also cried together. We had theme days, we had crazy hat day, birthdays, celebrations, bring your pet, bring your child, bring your whole self, bring an item that describes you. We adopted animals, so we had some surprise guests at our meetings. One was a llama. We also wore blue to celebrate and just increase the acceptance of autism. So with that was all extremely important. The other piece we did was we posed a question. This was especially imperative during all the social unrest. So we started our meetings with a question, such as, what would you do if you had no fear? What act of kindness have you done lately? Where do you seek inspiration? What shows are you binging? What songs are you listening to? What is your proudest accomplishment? And what aren't you saying? And eventually, we also increased that individual check-in time. So by understanding what people needed, if it was that coffee, that happy hour, and we also created town halls where literally no topic went untouched. Next slide, please. So curiosity takes on a few different forms. Curiosity, there are really 4 key elements of observation. So knowing your people is important, but in addition to this, it's really being present. And number 1 is stop using check-ins for just work only. Use the check-ins to understand how people are feeling and doing. Seize it as an opportunity. Second is look. Check for signs of burnout, of stress, or anxiety. Number 3, listen. Listen not only to what people are saying, but really important, listen to what they aren't saying, or for those nonverbal behaviors. But pose a question and do a check-in and learn. Learn is something that's critical as we think about human-centered design overall in design thinking, but ask more questions. Because if we take a curious mindset, we can create a culture of curiosity. Leadership is not about having or knowing all of the answers. And by shifting our leadership models from owning knowledge to promoting a culture of curiosity, we can fuel personal and professional transformation. So next slide, please. So recognizing that curiosity, a key piece of curiosity is listening. Here are a few best practices to really think about for listening. But before we do that, I'd love to hear in the chat, what are some of your best practices for listening? I love that. Listen to learn, not to respond. What else? Because I'll tell you, listening is a skill and an art. Be comfortable with silence. Listen with your body language. Yes. Whole body listening. Yes, the waiting 10 seconds before you respond is brilliant. Be transparent. Listen to understand. Give the speaker space. Repeat what you heard. Replay back what the speaker's saying and put away distractions. Brilliant. To add to those, and some of these will look familiar, definitely no judgment. We go to the first one here. Number 1, engage deeply to understand their reality. This is where no judgment, being present, putting away your distractions is critical. And again, just like we do with design thinking, we put our customer first. What about putting our individual team members and our team first, really seeking to understand? The second one, if we click, is with that listen, it's the whole body listening. It's listening and it's giving people space and time. The third one, allow for silence. And someone shared this, allowing for silence and not jumping in to fill it. Purposely creating space and creating room is critical. And let that individual, give them a chance to think through and to truly open up. We'll go on to the fourth. The body language. Often it's not what people say, it's what they don't say or what their body is doing. And this can provide just extraordinary cues. Next. Don't ignore unimportant details because actually they're probably the most important. And then finally, discover at least one new thing and remember it. Write it down so that you can continue to build on it in your upcoming conversations. All right, next slide, please. So as leaders, as designers, as thinkers, we're always uncovering insights for our customers. But how can we better leverage insights to understand our teams, our employees, our counterparts, and our peers? Well, first, it's grounding ourselves in what that insight is. It's that not yet obvious discovery about a person or a situation that enables a connection and a feeling of you get me. It's, again, just as apparent for when we look at creating campaigns or new products as it is for engaging and inspiring our teams. Next slide, please. And good insights. We know that the best insights are that truth, heart, action, and tension. And the key critical milestones when we're thinking about really those key insights. And I'll tell you, living through the pandemic and what we've heard and what we've learned, it hits it spot on. Next slide, please. So when we think about emphasizing that human connection, because many team members, they might have outdoor space, they might not, they might be living alone and feel isolated. It's important that we recognize them as individuals. So through calling on them, through reaching out to them, by asking how they're feeling. And some of the ways that we've done this at the American Dental Association is, number one, allowed staff to take time off to tend to family. No one was penalized. Everyone was recognized as that whole self. Second, we were very fortunate to have, it starts from the top. It's that leadership. And with Dr. Kathy O'Loughlin, our executive director, she's really helped to create that surround sound empathetic experience at the ADA. We've also pivoted, and we've utilized Agile, but I'll tell you, there was no greater time to utilize Agile than right now. We shut down all other work outside of COVID. Being in the healthcare industry, it was critical for us to provide information to dentists as well as to the public about essential oral health care. So we doubled down in this area. With this, we also found opportunities to have some fun because we recognized, people were working long hours. So to have some fun, but also importantly, we also use this opportunity to cross-train. We cross-trained individuals who were in some critical roles so that they could take breaks, so that they could be off, so they were not the only one on. And we offered some flexible schedules as well as time off and screen time off to be sure that folks wouldn't get to that burned out phase. So move to the next slide, please. One of the powerful internal, and this I'll tell you, this works extraordinarily well for family as well as professionally. It's called the one-word check-in. I utilize this at the beginning of every meeting, and many times I do it at the end. So we're going to take a moment here and do the one-word check-in now because it's powerful, and its power comes from its simplicity. So the one-word check-in is, how are you feeling? How are you feeling right now? So in one word, in the chat, how are you feeling? How are you feeling right now? Engaged, good. Overwhelmed. Okay, tired, frustrated, rushed, stressed, excited, expectant, optimistic, hopeful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing those. what this does when you're in a conversation from that, ooh, I like inspired, for that empathy is you have an understanding of where each individual is at that moment in time. Immediately you have a reflection of something that they haven't told you because you've asked. Now you've asked, you have a greater understanding, and then you can take that information and adapt your message. You can take that information and know more about that individual and what's taking place. So again, it's powerful. That one word check-in, I'll tell you, it opens the window for so much information. So next slide, please. So I'm going to share two quotes when I think about empathy and I think about what empathy means. First is from Henry Ford. You know, if there's any one secret of success, it lies in the ability to get the other person's point of view and see things from his angle as well as your own. And then Maya Angelou. People will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And feeling is something that's absolutely critical. So those, I believe that both of those quotes just really sum up when we think about that agile empathy and leadership. Next slide is all about asking questions. As children, we ask thousands of questions, thousands, actually hundreds of thousands of questions. As adults, we don't ask quite as many. It was because we believe that, you know, that the answer is celebrated over the curiosity and the journey. But asking questions with the intent to understand, just like when we listen with the intent to understand, is critical. And it's important for us to find more opportunities to ask more questions in your personal as well as your professional life so that we can, and part of that's creating a safe space so that the team can ask a question they can ask. We always hear ask anything, but really create that environment so that questions can come in. How can you bring this to your life? An example is when planning a meeting, write each agenda item as an open-ended question. How about asking your colleagues to bring their best question to a meeting? What about asking questions of yourself, writing down all the questions that you have about what lights you up to help, you know, ensure that you're following your purpose and your passion. So next slide, please. And empathetic questions, just again, as designers, it's about open-ended questions. So by bringing a question to a meeting or a conversation or an engagement, it can change the entire atmosphere. So examples, you know, how would your friends describe you? What's bringing you the most joy? Who is your hero? Next slide, please. So, question for all of you. I'd love your answers in the chat. We've talked so far about the internal aspect of empathy. In a moment here, we're going to talk external. But from the internal standpoint, how would you rate your organization? It can be a word, it can be a 1 to 10, 1 low, 10 high. I'm not going to tell them. But I think it's important to recognize how empathetic has your leadership been and your organization been. Please enter your answers in chat. Okay, I see a B plus, a 10. Oh, that's fabulous. I see multiple 10s. 9, 7. Fantastic. 8. Fantastic. Ooh, and then yes, with social justice topics. Beautiful. So it looks like there's still some room for improvement, but it looks like many of the organizations really leaned in. So let's go to the next slide. So briefly, we're going to touch on external empathy because employees are one half of the coin. The other side of the coin is about our customers. So here, some tools that can be utilized, not only today, but moving forward. One is essentialism. Essentialism is saying no to everything that's not a yes. What I mean by that is it's stopping promotions and other focused activity that's not going to accomplish the goal. So you're very intentional about what you say yes to, and you say no to everything else. For us, we stopped all other promotions and communications and focused solely on COVID. The second is communication. We stood up multiple new channels to increase that real-time communication, from weekly calls with our leadership and our volunteers to issues alert, messages from the president, interactive webinars. And we created these tools from looking at the social conversation by asking a lot of questions. The whole person resources, we have dedicated content for mental, emotional wellness, and we unified the project management support, so we didn't have competitive goals, we all shared the same goals. And we used the narrative, we utilized the narrative about creating value for customers through their voice, specifically in regards to COVID. So we put our customer in the center and we let them give us the grade and tell the story on what they found most valuable. Next slide, please. So as we pivoted, there were a few different things to think about. One, as well as learnings to move forward. Number one, by focusing on what was most important to our customers, which are our members, we created a variety of toolkits, webinars, special messaging, and the real world support. And I'm pleased to say that we're carrying many of those forward today. We got better. Second, we increased communication and access to our leadership. Our president gave out his cell phone number and email to all members and was actively taking calls and having conversations. And we were able to use that information to help real-time inform through using Agile, right? What next webinar do we need? What next real-time conversation? What key guidance needs to be put out? And we also leveraged our volunteers. We convened work groups of our most passionate members and co-created with them. So we applied design thinking throughout this to help lend their perspective, develop guidance for their colleagues, as well as help us develop guidance for our patients. We created a group of volunteers that provided questions and answers so that they too could help spread the information out more broadly. Next slide, please. So what was the result of all of this? Actually, I don't think we'll play, but what we recognized kind of by doing all of this was that our members found extreme value. They found such extreme value that we achieved the highest net promoter score that we had to date. And I'll talk more about our members and their voice. Next slide, please. But also, it's taking a temperature check of the employees. And I'm very pleased to share that the employees shared back with us that the teams were never more connected than when we were apart. So all of the internal empathy and all of the human connected exercises and practices we put in place worked. And today it's helping to really shift our culture, and shift it in such a positive where those real conversations continue. Next slide, please. And here's just an example of how we have had fun, and we continue to have some fun through our stand-ups. Also, the team has developed our own walking challenge. So the point is, again, it's about celebrating being human, and it's about celebrating what's going on, but it's also getting real during the very, really the tension-filled times and heavy conversations. We brought it, we talked about it, we shared it. And by creating that safe space, people are more connected and are helping one another out in so many different ways. Next slide, please. We've pulled through some new things that we didn't do before because of all of this. One is mindfulness. So a member of my team now hosts and leads a company-wide weekly meditation. And I'll tell you, it's packed. So now we have weekly meditation. Also, I've put in place for my team, recognizing that we have been glued to our screens for 14 months. It's really important to be able to unplug, right? So we're not just saying go and unplug, we're doing it. So after 3 p.m. on Wednesdays, we have people unplugged. Also, we're doing a rotating Friday afternoon off. on a regular basis across the team, because we need to recharge. A recharged individual just will feel so much better across all elements of their lives. So next slide, please. We've also learned to celebrate. We celebrate differently. We've sent gifts to one another. We've delivered gift cards. We're doing Cogniac notes. We're praising. Kudos are a core part of our meetings where we recognize one another as well as other people in the organization. So keeping the celebrations and using that moment just, again, to recognize what folks are doing has been huge. Next slide, please. And of course, I mentioned the tools. We have created hundreds of tools. So everything from, we're now talking about vaccinations. We have vaccination kits. We've been lobbying. For example, dentists in most states are now able to provide vaccinations. Again, we put together materials in just real time to help dentists as well as the public. Next slide, please. And the tools and materials, I'll tell you, just continue. So what are the results? When it came back to it, we achieved our highest Net Promoter Score. And Net Promoter is the likely to recommend. As it relates to most associations, they're in the low 20s. So we're very pleased. And even more important, 9 in 10 members relied on the ADA as well as the CDC. We're the top 2 box for information related to dental practices. And then as we look at our members who hadn't joined us in the past, 7 in 10, 7 out of 10 would be very interested in renewing membership. So we're seeing the value of all that we're doing. So final slide. So with that, through the end of our session, my call to action for you, and one last chat and we'll go to questions, is because you were here today, and with leading with empathy, how will you apply it moving forward? What's one thing you will do, continue to do, or do differently? And thank you. Awesome.
Great, fantastic, Stephanie. Let's see, if anyone has questions, feel free to post them in the Q&A tab over here. I think I'll get it started though. So it sounds like your organization's been really effective in adapting to everything that's happened in the last year. What are like the 1 or 2 things that you feel like you're going to bring forward when this pandemic's over and hopefully things go back to normal a little bit more?
Well, I think what's wild is the ADA is a 161-year-old organization. So for us, this was a massive transformation. Everyone was in the office before. So for us, it's again, the reality of the hybrid model. It's real. So for us, it's recognizing this is the new normal. This is the new normal. So how can we continue with this people-first approach and really give our teams, our people, the opportunity to be the CEOs of their own lives? They have more than shown that they have performed and excelled. So how can we work with them to determine the right mix and understanding their whole person's self? And what may have been a perk before, maybe a gym membership, maybe that's not the perk anymore. Maybe it's that they can work from wherever they want to.
Yeah, I think that's been a big learning for a lot of organizations, is really how effective people can be for adopting those processes. And it's not just the tools we use, but it's the, it's like you illustrated, it's the routines and it's the check-ins and how we interact with each other socially, and creating those structures. It's been really valuable. Well, awesome. If there aren't any more questions, wanted to say thank you, Stephanie. It's been a great presentation. I think a lot of us are walking away feeling inspired by this, as well as learning a lot of sort of practical things that we can apply. So thank you again.
Thank you for having me. And again, I would just challenge you to lead with empathy and curiosity, and do that one word check-in. It will blow your mind with your teams. Thank you for having me.